Welcome to For the Long Run, the podcast exploring the why behind what keeps runners running long, strong, and motivated. I'm your host, Jonathan Levitt. Through personal and professional connections in the running world, I have the privilege of getting to know some amazing athletes. I've always been fascinated by the psychological aspect of running, and this podcast is aimed at exploring this and much more. I hope you enjoy. Welcome back. I have Jeff Stern joining me on the podcast today. Jeff, thanks so much for taking some time to chat.
Yeah, I appreciate you having me on, John.
For sure. So first question, as has become, I guess, pretty standard for the last, 60 episodes. Who is Jeff?
Jeff is a dog lover, a runner, a coach, a human, an athlete, someone who just loves life in general.
That is awesome. And you like running pretty long distances. Is that correct?
Yeah, I think I'm getting up there a little bit. I'm relatively new to ultra running, so I haven't tackled the 100-mile distance or the multi-day or anything like that. But recently pushed myself to run the longest I have ever before, and it was a pretty awesome experience.
So you ran the Backbone Trail and scored the FKT in 11 hours, 10 minutes, and 39 seconds. Talk to me about why did you want to go for that?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think like most people during this year, especially athletes and ultra runners, we've been trying to find new ways to challenge and push ourselves. And obviously, fastest known times have been pretty safe, socially distant, endeavors. And Backbone Trail is relatively local to me here in Southern California. And it's something I've always admired. Anything that traverses an entire mountain range and is point to point has always been appealing to me. And decided I really wanted to get a crack at one of those longer distances. I had done 100K last year and wanted to give another one a go. And this is a little bit longer than 100K, but I felt like it was in my wheelhouse and training had been going well, and it just made sense to go for it, especially being so close and being able to get down on the course and recon it and really learn the ins and outs. I think made sense from a logistics standpoint to give it a go.
Awesome. So I want to dive more into that, but before we get there, let's sort of paint the picture a little bit more. Do you remember your first run?
First run in my entire life?
Yep.
That's a great one. Where my mind goes is I grew up in the Bay Area, and I remember running the mile around the Little League baseball fields during PE, I think. And I just remember always being pretty swift on my feet, and I was a smaller kid, and I think it was a skill that came naturally to me, and I never ended up tapping into it. I guess growing up too much, I didn't do cross country or track and field, but I do always remember that moment of running my first mile, and I can picture Boyle Park and the field in Mill Valley, and I think it was probably around 4 laps around the field. And it was just a good feeling. So I think you can say I've been a runner since then, but not a dedicated runner like I am today.
Where did that genesis come from?
I think more recently, just the simplicity of running and the freedom of it that it provides me, and it's always been a good time to think. And especially as I've become a coach and coaching high school cross country, I think running myself aligns a lot with kind of learning about how the body works and, all the different elements that come into play, and becoming a better coach and just a better athlete and person in general.
And what is it about the ultra distance and 100Ks and eventually, as you alluded to, 100-miler that does it for you versus the marathon or the 5K?
I think you really get a chance to experience all the lows and all the highs that you kind of have on a daily life spectrum, or even a couple years or your entire life. It really feels like you're out there and the conditions are constantly changing. You're always in a new place, both physically on the trail, in the woods, in the mountains, but also mentally. You really go from feeling amazing, like you can tackle the distance, you can tackle the challenge, no problem, to some sort of obstacle popping up and forcing you to recalibrate and reevaluate and come up with a new plan to get through it and get back to that kind of level-headed feeling. It really becomes a transformative experience. I think, especially, I've found the longer that I go, the more types of those different changes that happen. And I think a lot of people say, running 100 miles or running a really long distance is experiencing life in a day. And I can definitely say that I've had that. And I had that on the Backbone. And as you're building up, I feel like you can have that even in your initial first trail run or marathon or 50K. And it's all about where you're at in the moment. And just really appreciating those constant kind of changes that are always being thrown your way, and how you're able to adapt and move forward and keep the progress going. So I really enjoy that. And I think as I methodically build towards, running 100 miles one day, I know that when that day comes, that it'll be, even more so than kind of what I've described and what I expect it to be. So I'm looking forward to it, but trying to take a smart approach to it and keeping healthy and all the little things that come along with it.
Yeah, I love that, the life in the day analogy, or like the riding the ebbs and the flows of how it works. I think surface level, or at its surface, it's like, well, why would you enjoy the not fun stuff? But I think the reason that the fun stuff is as fun as it is because of the delta between the lows and the highs. And I remember one of the first podcasts I did was with Magda Boulay, and she talked about finding flow, and like when you get into that moment, it's all worth it. But you can't get there without the training, and you can't get there without experiencing those lows. And if you could just like bottle up that feeling of when it's really good, like that's aspirational. That's like, okay, I want that. I need more of that. And I personally, I think that's what makes it all worth it.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I think, those struggles or those low points, almost where you're taking a half step or even a full step back, it feels like in the moment, are critical to the entire journey. And really, I think a lot of people would tell you, and I know I would say it is, you got to have those almost in the moment negative feelings and doubt to really appreciate kind of all the success and, finding that flow and really feeling like you're floating. I mean, when you're flowing, you're not even really running, you're just kind of fundamentally being and really enjoying just everything around you, and you kind of forget that it's a run or an FKT or a race or whatever it is. And I think for a lot of us runners, that's why we keep coming back for more, because it does tend to be fleeting, but it exists, it's there. And I mean, tapping into that is an incredible feeling. I don't know that there's anything better than that in life.
For sure. So talk to me about Backbone and what that trail was like, and sort of how the day unfolded.
Yeah, I mean, I guess the trail, it runs, just a little background on the Backbone. It runs from pretty close to downtown LA in Pacific Palisades, Will Rogers State Park, all the way up and over and across the entire Santa Monica mountain range, which is above Malibu, more or less, and ends in Ventura at Point Magoo. So It's kind of goes through a lot of different terrains. There's wooded kind of chaparral. There's very much kind of the Southern California spiky, succulents and those kind of plants out there. There's even a little bit of kind of that NorCal vibe. You get some deep wooded forests. So it really covers a wide range of terrain, and lots of ups and lots of downs, and steep and twisty and curvy. So it gives you a little bit of everything. And for me, living just up the road in Santa Barbara, we have some similar terrain, and I felt like, training at home really made sense and applied a lot of my skills towards, having success on the backbone. And, when the day came, I felt pretty much as prepared as I could be. I think you could always have a few more weeks or a couple more long runs, but mentally, I just remember feeling the whole week leading up to it, I was ready to run. I didn't really have any nerves or anything. I just wanted to get out there and get a chance to connect all the different sections of the trail and put them together in a nice, beautiful run. So, that was kind of the thoughts on that one.
Cool. What was the lowest point of the day?
For me, I think I always struggle mentally with approaching and cresting the halfway point of any kind of long run or event. I guess it doesn't matter whether it's a 5K or 100K, something about getting really close to that middle section. I don't know. It just inside me, I tend to struggle or battle with the whole, you're only halfway done, but you're also halfway done. There's that positive and that kind of negative connotation. And I think it's something I could still work on. And I just remember getting there thinking, wow, I'm starting to feel it a little bit. And I know, the wind, we had kind of a little bit of an inclement weather weekend, a couple weekends back, and the winds were picking up, and, it was getting to that point where the struggle is definitely real. But, I did supported. So I had some pacers and a good crew with me, and I rebounded pretty quickly. And, before you know it, you're over the halfway point, and you're ticking off miles, and you're like, okay, now I'm closer to the finish. And, I guess it wasn't really like a true low point where I was, forced to be walking or anything like that really slowed me down. But it was just like the realization that, okay, you're in it. This is what you signed up for. This is what you wanted. Now, how are you going to respond? And I was actually really proud of myself for not letting that, bring me down or kind of bring me to somewhat of a halt. And I kept pushing and actually picked up the pace a little bit and started putting a lot of time into the current FKT, kind of right around that midway point. I had known in the back of my mind that, because I really studied, Jeff Browning was the athlete who had the FKT before me, and I really studied his splits and his file, and I knew that he slowed pretty significantly right around that halfway point, right where I was starting to feel it. And so I just dug deep and realized that this was the time to really put some time in the bank, and just kept chugging along and moved past that hurdle.
Cool. The middle of whatever it is, challenge or whatever, I find that to be particularly difficult too. It's like, all right, now it's time to just not screw it up for the rest of the time. I have a buddy who, so I used to be, or I am still part of a group called November Project, and we would run Harvard Stadium every Wednesday morning. And I remember we were going for the fastest time around the stadium personally. And I forget what the scenario was, but he was basically like, you've come this far, like standing right in the middle, like you've come this far, don't screw it up now. And it just like put the whole thing in perspective. Like, you've already done half of a block of work, whatever the work was. Honor that and keep on pushing, essentially.
Yeah. When you're kind of over the hump and you're really deep into that kind of unknown feeling and territory. Well, I guess not unknown, but like in the moment it's unknown, right? If you're doing your longest distance or you're trying to tackle some sort of PR or whatever it is, it's as long as you have that faith that you kind of are gonna, come out of that with a little bit of an altered perception of like what's possible for yourself, and knowing that you kind of have to get close to that bottom to get there. I think it really helps propel you forward. Definitely helps me for sure.
Definitely. So, what was the distance of Backbone?
It's just under 68 miles.
Got it. So you crossed the 100K. Was that your longest run? You said?
Yeah, it was my longest run. I had done Black Canyon in 2019. And so, yeah, once I went over the 100K mark, it was officially my longest run. And, I thought I was going to think about that a little bit more on the day, but it didn't even really cross my mind. At that point, I knew I was so far ahead, and we had just finished a big descent, and there were some bike support and some other friends that had kind of come in to run the last few miles, that I wasn't even focused on that point until a couple of days later. I was like, oh yeah, that's right. That was right around when I crossed over my longest run. So it didn't end up being as big of a deal as I thought it was going to be.
Speaking of long, you said that eventually the 100-mile distance is a goal of yours. What is it about going that far that intrigues you?
I think back to like jumping from 50K to 50 miles and knowing, you're almost doubling what you're running, right? And then the transition from 50 miles to 100K is not a huge jump. But then, here we are again at that kind of moment where, okay, most steps forward involve going 100K to 100 miles, and you're kind of in a way replicating the 50K to 50 mile jump. And I think there's a lot of that's 30-40 miles. There's a lot of room for error, there's a lot of room for success, there's a lot of room for kind of back to what we were talking about, just the unknown and the challenges and the obstacles. And that really excites me. Like, in my mind, going on these adventures and running these ultras and these FKTs really mean taking on risk and uncertainty. And I feel like it's in those moments that the most growth as an individual is available, and you really get a chance to stretch yourself as a being, as a human, and your soul in so many new ways. It's kind of hard to describe, but I know when I'm in there that it's really good for me ultimately, both as like a runner and just as a person. So, with a little bit more experience and some more miles in the legs, I think I'll be ready to tackle it physically. And then it's just a question of mentally chipping away at it. And I know it won't be easy. It'll be hard, but I think that's ultimately why I do these things. So, yeah, I feel excited just talking about it. So I know that it's something that I definitely want to do at some point.
Cool. What do you do do you do any sort of mental training?
You mean like with a mental performance coach, or just like on my own solo?
Yeah, just in general. Some people practice visualization. Some people practice gratitude. It sort of depends on resources and objectives and goals and whatnot. But I'm curious if there's some level of intentional practice when it comes to the mental side.
Yeah, I do meditate a little bit every day, and I think a part of meditation is connected to visualization. I know, when you're meditating, you're kind of unplugging and just being, and not really, worrying about anything that's going on in the world or externally. And I think that does help with focus and visualization, and kind of whatever you're doing kind of next in your day, or whatever is lined up in the future. So I wouldn't say that I spend a ton of time doing that on a weekly or monthly basis, but every day I do a little bit of meditation, and I think that helps for sure.
Cool. One question or one topic I like to cover on here is balance and understanding how both professional and non-professional athletes approach balance, specifically in regards to running and life. So what is your relationship with balance?
I feel like I have a pretty balanced lifestyle. I mean, I don't, quote unquote, have a real or full-time job. I guess that's changing and has changed a lot this year for everyone too. But, I do a little bit of online coaching. I coach kids at a local high school for cross country. I do a little bit, I guess, professional running. I also do some writing. And I do a little bit of freelance kind of marketing work for some brands in the outdoor space. So that's quite a collection of things. And I think just by the virtue of doing all those things, I find a good balance. I also have a couple dogs, so I'm always out there kind of unplugging and trying to see the world through their eyes, and they're constantly, joyous, let's play all day, every day kind of vibe. So I think that keeps me pretty grounded and balanced. And at this point in my life, I really can't imagine ever doing something full time, I guess you could say. I really enjoy being able to plug in and plug out of all the different things I just mentioned. And I think it allows me to have, a better focus on each one that I do, because it's not, all encompassing. I'm not thinking about each one of those, all day, every day. It's like a little bit here and there. And that really allows me to have a fresh perspective when I do kind of jump into whatever it is I'm working on with all those different kind of responsibilities.
How'd you get into the coaching side of it?
A buddy of mine asked me to help him coach this high school cross country team about 5 years ago. And I was like, yeah, that sounds great. I'd love to get involved and work with kids. I feel like working with kids is a great way to, I don't know, rejuvenate yourself and get a little bit of youthful energy. And, as we get older, it's important, I think, to connect with the new generation or the next generation. So that's how I first got started in kind of the running coaching world. And then I don't remember specifically, but I'm pretty sure one of the parents of one of the kids on the team said, do you do any like adult coaching as well? And I was kind of like, yeah, sure. Why not? And so I started helping one of the adults get more into running, and it just kind of proliferated from there. And yeah, it's hard to imagine turning back now.
How have you and your athletes been managing 2020?
Yeah,
particularly the high schoolers. I'm curious on that.
Typically high school cross country, would start serious training in the summer, and then obviously as we're getting close to the fall season, we'd be ramping up workouts, and meets would start happening. And with everything that's going on, obviously none of the summer training happened, and there's no meets in the foreseeable future. And so we actually just started practices a couple weeks ago. So it was definitely a strange fall. I feel like I was helping some of the kids do training on their own, right? A lot of the kind of the ones that were, more used to a heavier load of training were really antsy for it. And I think right now they're just really grateful that we are able to have practices, and cross country is one of those sports, we're outside and more or less There's plenty of space for everyone to social distance and be safe and whatnot. So I think a lot of the kids, I'm just really impressed with them, honestly. Like, they have a great perspective despite, all of the unknown and kind of the wrenches thrown in their typical day-to-day lives. And I just really have seen them kind of grow up quickly and have a much more mature attitude than I feel like I would have had at their age about everything going on. So I've been really impressed with them, and they've been very dedicated, even though, we haven't been practicing at full strength or really have anything, on the calendar to work back from. We're just out there focusing on getting exercise and, doing a little bit of speed here and there, and building some strength and kind of some of the auxiliary stuff, so that whether we return in the new year or whether this is all work being put in for fall 2021, I think they all have a great perspective on that and realize it's a great time to work on weaknesses and focus on what they can control and not let a lot of kind of the variables that are totally outside our control, dictate how they're thinking and feeling and acting, and just going about it from a day-to-day perspective.
Yeah, the ability to just like put in a lot of miles is unique. I was talking with Neely Spence Gracie yesterday, who's a professional marathoner, and I think she's 30 years old, and she's like, I've never had this long of a base season. She's like, I think she said that the last time she had a period like this was high school or college. So, almost or more than 10 years ago. And she's like, this is for me fantastic and a confirmation that like I just really love running. And we were just having a phone call, and I like wish I recorded it, because it was so interesting from a professional standpoint of saying like, look, this can be useful, and the work that we're doing now just builds and builds and builds into whatever it is that's next. So I think that some people get to that place really easily, and they're either intrinsically motivated or focused on the overall process, and they're not tied to a specific goal. But I'm curious if you have any athletes you coach, or maybe it's been your own experience where not having something on the calendar is challenging, and what was the coaching that you provided to that athlete?
Yeah, I've definitely struggled with wanting, especially when things are not on the calendar and a big race or some sort of goal is not there kind of staring you in the face, to just go out and hammer, right? Kind of like unnecessary destruction where there's no easy days. There's a lot of quantity and maybe the quality is not really there. And I think kind of what you were relaying is this long drawn out endurance year that we've all been more or less provided is a great way to kind of refine that, aerobic system and really build a strong foundation for the future. And, I definitely have athletes that are, jonesing and wanting to do FKTs or time trials. And I think those definitely have a good place in the schedule and in the calendar. But, just like any kind of racing season, you want to strategically plan those and build appropriately and not dig yourself too big of a hole. So I think just reminding them, that everyone is more or less in the same place. And, this wasn't the year that everyone got everything that they wanted, but, it's a year to be super thankful and grateful for what we already have, and being healthy and being able to just go out there and like you said, enjoy the run and put in the miles and realize that things will come back. And when they do, they'll be even more ready than they could ever imagine. And I think people will be lining up at races, and whether it's 2021 or 2022, and the fire will just be burning even stronger for everyone. And there's some sort of collective, kind of feeling when everyone has those sensations that will just help us all rise to a new level. So I think this may be, I alluded to like taking a half step back, like this year might be kind of a half step back, but ultimately it's going to propel us so much further, down the road, that I think having that kind of long-term perspective will be so beneficial. It's hard to even kind of put numbers or statistics on it.
Yeah. When this all started, I had Shalane Flanagan on the podcast, and I asked her, I was like, well, how are you and your athletes focusing? And the phrase she used is stuffing the silo. Like, we don't know what's coming. And there was so much unknown. This was end of March. And she's like, we don't know what's coming, but it's always true that consistency will bring better results. So let's just be consistent for a very long period of time. And it'll be fascinating once races start again with something that's, so objective, like what is the 2021 BQ standard going to look like, or 2022 BQ standard? It's either going to be much faster or much slower, because people either, at scale got better or got worse. And I have no idea what it's going to be. Selfishly, I hope it's slower so I can finally get in. But it was just, 70 seconds too slow last year. But it'll be fascinating to see, how many course records go down and how many more FKTs are set, or if there's, a slip back into a bit more normalcy from a results standpoint, where everyone's just racing all the time because they can eventually. And I'm getting excited just like thinking about this, that like we're going to be able to do it again. Cause I miss that, race weekend camaraderie and the post-race beers and all that stuff that, nobody has, had the privilege of enjoying, in any sort of normal setting this year, unless apparently you live in New Zealand.
Yeah, I mean, I feel the same way. I think everyone is just super excited with the anticipation to get out there and make those new connections at events and races and see, where all their hard work is paid off. And, I have a lot of friends that do coaching of various sorts, and, there's always going to be some drop off. And I think, some struggles with retention and motivation and all that. I think that's common even in a normal year. Right. But I don't know. I do feel like just in the last few months that the perspective of people has fallen in line to what you were saying, where, hey, consistency really does count, and it counts for a lot more than you might think. And if there's ever been a year to be consistent, like this is the year, because we're just gonna come out of this and just have all this pent up energy and excitement and stoke and appreciation for all the people that we don't know that we're looking forward to meeting and connecting with. And I don't know, I feel that amongst my friends and people like you that maybe we've met or maybe we've crossed paths, but like now I'm really excited to see you whenever the next time or the first time that'll be. And I just feel a lot of that energy, and I think people are really jonesing for it, but they realize that now is not quite the time, but we're getting closer, and that kind of positive thinking and vibe is super important and is really contagious.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think that like some of the challenge that we've had this year is that like it is all so unknown, or it has been so unknown. And I saw an article, I think it was in the New York Times, and it was talking about how the human brain is not equipped to understand something that doesn't have like a tangible end. Mm-hmm. And for so long, this pandemic has not had a tangible end. And within the last week or two, there does appear to be a tangible end. And so you've felt this like dramatic shift of people actually, as you said, feeling hopeful, feeling excited, feeling like there is an end in the works, is super cool. And it makes me think of these like last man standing races where there isn't an end. And I think I'm going to need to have another little chit chat with Amelia or Courtney to understand the carryover between the lack of an end to the pandemic or whatever, and the lack of an end to an actual race, where that part is so fascinating that you can start something that you don't know when it's going to end.
Totally. And you just kind of keep your head on straight and, doing the things that you can do and control the controllable, and just be respectful of everyone around you, and knowing that everyone is kind of going through it in their own way. And I think there's a lot to be learned from this. And life is clearly an ultra marathon this year. Feels like at least a marathon, if not a 100-miler ultra marathon of some sort. But I don't know, really, what group of people is better at epitomizing kind of that type of challenge than ultra runners? So I think it makes sense and it aligns for sure.
Yeah, it's like you signed up for a 5K and it's turned into a last man standing. Switching gears a little bit, what do you wish you knew when you started running ultras or trail running that you know now?
I wish I knew that there were so many more things that were vital to success beyond just the, one foot in front of the other, like running and moving forward. Obviously, it boils down to that, but there's just so many elements, right? Like the nutrition and the hydration and the pacing and the strategy, and even, before race day, the extra strength and mobility and sleep and recovery, right? I mean, that right there is almost a dozen different things that I think really come into play when trying to set up a successful plan to not only enjoy the day, but get the most out of yourself. And especially the longer ones, right? Where, again, going back to, there's so many things that can go wrong. And if you have this foundation that you've built, over the course of months or years of training, really allows you to kind of dig through and grind through those tough moments. So, I mean, this is, I think, probably my third or fourth year running ultras. And the first couple of years, I just honestly had no idea what I was doing, right? It's like, oh, let's go out and run and see what happens. And now, I mean, this FKT really solidified for me that the whole process and build up is really the hard work that you're putting in, so that, on race day or on FKT day, that you just go out and you have fun and you kind of execute off, everything that you've put in. And yeah, it'll all kind of come together at that point.
Cool. Let's say fast forward 10 years. What are you really proud of?
In 10 years, what am I going to be really proud of? I think, I plan to keep coaching. So I think it'll be really cool to, see all these high schoolers and see where they're at, whether it's in their running lives or, in their professional or, social lives, having great success and knowing that hopefully I played a small part in helping them become, amazing adults and, active members in our communities. And maybe some of them will be coaches themselves. And I don't know, I remember back to when I was in high school and I played mostly ball sports, baseball and soccer and tennis and football. And I just remember a coach that I had, his name was Scott Evans. And I always looked up to him and thought he was just the greatest guy in the world, mid 30s, probably still figuring out life, just like, most of us in our 30s are. But I just remember thinking, man, I want to be like Scott one day. And so I guess my hope would be that, like, in 10 years, there's, a handful of kids out there that remember their cross country experience and are, look and remember me fondly and are, trying to emulate me in some way. So I guess that would be my main goal for 10 years from now.
Cool. Yeah, it's the legacy aspect that keeps coming up more and more, which is super cool.
Yeah, and of course, I want to keep racing and pushing myself and all that, but I don't know. I think inspiring others and helping uplift, the next generation or just people in general is definitely more important than, any FKTs or race wins or anything like that. That's all very much secondary for me.
Very cool. And so you also mentioned that you do some writing. You want to talk about that?
Yeah, I do a bit of freelance writing for Ultra Running magazine, mostly, human interest stories, athletes that, maybe don't get a lot of press, try and shine some light on them, or even some of the photographers and content creators in the sport, putting their face on an article and showing everybody like who the humans are behind these people that are out, taking photos and giving us all this cool, content to remember our experiences by. So I really enjoy of like yourself, interviewing people, getting to know people, finding out what makes them tick, and trying to tell a cool story, and have enjoyed doing that for, I guess, about the last year and a half or so. And have a wonderful editor in Amy Clark at Ultra Running Magazine that's super receptive to kind of any ideas that I throw her way. And it's been really fun for me to kind of do that side of the sport as well.
Yeah, one of the things you mentioned there is uncovering sort of human interest stories that other people aren't covering, and it's sort of like it's a tough balance between covering like super well known stories and people who anyone will click on, and these compelling lesser known people, and it's something that like I think about a lot with the podcast and guest selection. How do you choose who's going to be on? Who do you invite and whatnot? So I'm curious, what's your approach to that?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a couple different ways. It could be through doing your research and looking, in a more typical year, looking at race results, or, researching on social media, or just seeing what connections you have, and kind of a friend of a friend of a friend type thing. But ultimately, I think I'm looking for people that are maybe a little bit more introverted and less likely to kind of put themselves out there. And so I kind of like tap them on the shoulder and poke them a little and say, hey, I think people would really resonate with your story if you're open to chatting, or having a conversation. And so yeah, kind of, I mean, I guess the main column I started with Ultra Running Magazine called Diamond in the Rough. So like someone who I think clearly has a lot of talent and a lot to give and a lot to share, and just kind of trying to bring them out of the rough and into the limelight for at least a brief moment.
Cool. Well, if we want to follow along with you and your journey and any future endeavors, where can we find you on social?
Yeah, that's a good question. I'm at Uponward on all social channels. So just Up and Onward, UPONWARD. You can check out my website, uponward.com. Send me a message. I'm always happy to chat and meet with new people and hear their stories. So yeah.
Awesome. Well, Jeff, thanks so much for coming on to chat today, and hopefully see you out in those beautiful Santa Barbara mountains, or somewhere in California or out west sometime soon.
Yeah, let me know when you make it out here. I'd love to get a run in with you.
For sure.
Thanks, John.
That's it for today's episode. Like many long runs, it's sad when it has to end. I hope you join in next week on For the Long Run, and in the meantime, happy trails. If you've enjoyed this episode, it would mean a lot to me if you shared it so that others can find it and enjoy it too.